Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I have a very special guest today, someone I'm just thrilled to talk to, and this is a person that's helped me a lot on my journey of truth. Has helped me to connect a lot of dots regarding the Great Reset and the plans that the worldwide elite are doing. He's very knowledgeable. He's been paying attention for a long time. I haven't been paying attention nearly as long, so hopefully I can learn something really valuable today. So I want to welcome everybody to the discussion with David Knight today. And I got a couple quick questions I'm going to ask him, and hopefully everything will be nice and smooth. So I appreciate you for being here, David. Really do.
Well, thank you, Vince. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. What you said.
All right. Well, I have some interesting things to tell you. I recently visited a church in Tulsa about a week and a half ago, maybe almost 2 weeks ago, and I actually ran face to face into Roger Stone.
Yeah.
I dropped off my son, I turned around, and he was right there in the lobby. So I was actually pretty shocked as I walked right up to him. I go, "Oh my gosh, you're Roger Stone." And he said, "Yeah," and he confirmed it. And I'm like, "I just can't believe I'm seeing you face to face." And so he suggested I get a picture with him. So we actually did get a picture. But I know you have a long history with Roger Stone through the InfoWars channel. Who was your former employer. What would you like people to know about Roger Stone, and do you think his conversion to Christianity after the Mueller hearing got over, do you think that was genuine or not?
Well, let me just say, I don't know Roger well enough. I haven't really talked to him about his conversion to Christianity because he had left InfoWars. I've known Roger since the Trump campaign. I think he came on board about the fall of 2015. And I've interviewed him many times. Not really, we were on very cordial terms. I've had my political disagreements with him. I never really understood the Nixon tattoo on the back. But because Nixon was not my favorite president. You look at all the different things that happened, the creation of the Department of Energy, the EPA, wage and price controls, a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. Clearly, Nixon didn't understand the limitations of the Constitution. So I had my differences with Roger on that, but we had a lot of things that we agreed on politically, and I hope he has had a conversion. That would be my desire for anybody. I would not discourage him in any of this, and I hope it has been a genuine conversion for him. The key thing is not that somebody is perfect, but that Christ is working in their life. And that they are different. We all start at a different place. And so we could be moving towards Christ from a position that maybe was very far away. And I know that Roger would be the first one to tell you that he was very, very far away earlier in his life. So I don't know about his conversion. I do know about his politics. And I do know that we've had a lot of disagreements. And one of the key things that I disagreed with InfoWars on, which is why I'm not there anymore, is about what happened in 2020, especially. There wasn't any wiggle room to say 4D chess anymore after the lockdown, and there wasn't any wiggle room after the vaccine, and there wasn't any wiggle room after the election, and there wasn't any wiggle room left at the end of December when they had missed all of the deadlines for the election contesting and had not done anything that they needed to do in the state legislatures. So I was not interested in participating in the Stop the Steal thing. I called it a grift, and I did it on air. I did it on social media, and so we had too big a differences for me to continue there.
Yeah. Quick follow-up question on that. Do you think he was involved with any of the money situation, like the fundraising or anything like that? Or I don't know if you would know that or not, but do you think he was involved with that at all?
I have no idea what he had in terms of fundraising. I do know from what we know about Trump because of the disclosure is that, and this came out shortly after the election, that about a month before the election to about a month after, so it's early October till late December, the majority of the money that he raised during that period of time was after the election. And I know that he didn't spend a lot of money of his own on this particular election. Because, you look at what he had spent the previous election, he'd spent over $60 million. He only spent about $8 million of his own money in this one. And he walked away after the election with more than $250 million. He hasn't, the first $8,000 that anybody contributed, was going to go to Trump, and he gave a cut to the RNC. After you gave $8,000, then he would start to finance the investigation of the election. So the whole thing was a fraud, quite frankly. And what was happening with InfoWars was from 2 days after the election, at least, when you had the Stop the Steal thing from Pachinik, they were giving people false hope. Alex was using that to get on podiums. He was using it to fundraise, to gain an audience. And I thought that was reprehensible before, and it would have been reprehensible even if January the 6th hadn't happened.
Yeah, I agree. Now, here's a great question for you. If you had the opportunity to interview Donald Trump and ask any question that you wanted that he was forced to answer, would you do it, and what would you ask?
Well, I would ask him if he discounts the government's own data as to the harm that's been done by his vaccine. He keeps telling everybody it's a great vaccine. Everybody should take it. He's so proud of it. And so he must not believe anything the CDC says about the vaccine. So why did he believe anything the CDC said about the pandemic? And, of course, the other question that he's been asked over and over again is why he didn't fire Fauci. And you've heard his answers. He said it's not Fauci. It's Biden, right? And yet it is Fauci.
Yeah. Now, here's something I'm kind of curious about. I don't know if you followed the USMCA very much, but I was happy that Trump was able to get NAFTA repealed because that was something I wanted for a while. That's one of the key things that made me want to support him when I first started seeing him talk about the issues. But, you know, he said he was going to have the brightest and best business people, but he ended up getting Robert Lighthizer, who is a CFR goon. Totally corrupt. And I don't remember all the data, but when I looked at it a little bit, it looks like they put a lot of stuff in that I was very concerned about. I think it was giving more control over to like a centralized body of people in these countries. I haven't heard you talk about the USMCA. Do you have some thoughts on that or some things that you liked or disliked about that?
I talked about it when it came out. And I posed. I thought my take on it was exactly what you just said. It's nothing but a warmed over NAFTA, and it's still the sovereignty issues still remain. And that's the real issue with it. And my take on it when it came out was that by giving us a short-term win in a couple of different areas, dairy and other things. That did not, all that did was just use that as a beard to cover up the fact that they were retaining the sovereignty issues that have always been part of the problem with NAFTA. You can have a trade agreement without having a unification. Yeah. And the economic unifications that are the basis of NAFTA and the basis of how the EU began, and we know how that began. That began with a trade bloc, and then you get... you start to have political alliances and you start to move borders. The next thing you know, you've got a unified currency. Next thing you know, you've got a government that's dictating everything in your country to you from a distant area. So we knew that path and where it was headed. Going back to Zbigniew Brzezinski, when he started talking about the Trilateral Commission, he was talking about creating these massive trade blocs. Economic aspect is the way that you begin the political unification. So he wanted a political unification with North America, with Europe, and with Asia, and then he was going to go from those three blocks to a global governance. And if you look at the mechanisms of NAFTA and of USMCA, they're still have at the core of it, it is still a sovereignty issue where there is a supranational above the sovereignty of the nations way to adjudicate trade and other issues, and the corporations are equal to the governments, and the organization itself is superior to the government. So I have a big problem with that. That's not necessary in order to have a trade agreement to sell milk or beef or things like that. Not at all. Yeah,
that's another thing that kind of bothered me about this, because he talked about a lot, like just doing just individual country agreements, and then that's not what came out. So
that's right.
So that's what bothered me about it. I have a couple questions about Alex Jones. Hopefully these are okay to answer. I don't know. We'll see. Alex has self-identified as a Christian, but he clearly has a few extra biblical beliefs. Since you know him personally, how would you describe his religious beliefs?
I would say they're not anywhere close to orthodox. That my understanding of Christian beliefs. He's got a lot of. I would say that he's kind of a mixture of prosperity gospel and New Age. Is what I would characterize his beliefs as.
Okay.
And you can kind of hear that, and if you see that, and I think he's got a website. I think he calls it Reset Wars or something like that.
Okay.
And if you look at it, that's exactly what it is, what they're selling. And it charges people, several $100s to take a course. The thing is a grifting scam, and it is antithetical to Christianity. It really is.
Okay. All right. Now, Alex Jones lost the Sandy Hook case, and to be honest, I've never heard what actually happened on that from that cast or whatever happened on that. The way he described it was he had different points of view, and they would debate that. But apparently something else happened, or I've never seen the footage of it. But can you tell me briefly what Alex Jones said about this that got him in trouble, or is it just what he did hosting it?
Well, my understanding is, and I believe I was the first person to bring in Wolfgang Halbig to talk to him because I was concerned about what was being done in terms of intimidating his investigation. Now, regardless of the content that Wolfgang has put out there, at that time he had a long history of having been part of the Florida Highway Patrol, I believe it was, or some law enforcement agency. He had also worked as a principal. Then he had taken those two experiences and put them together as a school security consultant. And he had investigated every school shooting since Columbine. But when he started investigating what was happening in Newtown, he got threatened by the Florida Highway Patrol. And that was, I thought, very odd. Today, it's not that big a deal to get threatened by people. I mean, it is a big deal if I've had a lot of people that have deplatformed me, but I've not had the police show up and threaten me. And so I thought that was something that needed to be talked about. And then as he continued his investigation, his theories, and I say they're theories because he didn't have, I believe, any proof for what he was saying. And I think the problem with Sandy Hook was they got into a detail. In other words, when you look at a situation and it looks fishy and it looks like the government is feeding you a false narrative, I think the important thing is to focus on that narrative and whether or not that narrative is true. We cannot accurately do our own investigations because we don't have power to investigate like the law enforcement agencies do. So I think the situation like that is to fact check that, to sanity check it, to investigate narrative. We can do that. What is public, and we can ask questions. And if there are holes in it, contradictions in it, then we need to carefully hold that out to the public, and then question the agenda that they've attached to it. Now, the specifics of Alex, I know that they had held a debate between Wolfgang Halbig and between somebody who was skeptical of it. So there was that type of thing that had happened. I was not really involved in it after the initial stage. And I even remarked to a fellow worker there, I won't say who it was, because I don't want to get him in any trouble. He still works there. And I said to him, I said, how in the world can they continue to accuse Alex of saying that nobody died? And I said, he didn't say that. I had not heard him say that because I don't have time to do my work and to watch Alex as well. I was typically working while he was working. And that was, a lot of this had happened before I had my show. I definitely was on a different schedule. My show began. I never saw it. But I would sometimes see parts of what he had. But I said to the coworker, I said, how do they keep this thing going? And he goes, well, the bad thing is it was part of a rant. And evidently, he did not take that back in the required time. And if you think and it is inaccurate, you have a period of time, as I understand, to make a correction and to not be held liable for it. He has recanted that, but I think he waited too long. I think he doubled down on issues rather than coming out against it immediately. And so the problem is he hasn't stuck to a story. And he hasn't been consistent with it. And the other problem was timing. But I think that when he said it, I still haven't seen where he said it. But from what the coworker, or to me, he said it as part of a rant.
Okay. This is an interesting question for you. Do you believe that the feds were involved with the Parkland shooting in some ways? There were some interesting things that came out. Apparently, a testimony from one of the teachers is that she got a look at the shooter, who was, but they were in like black, SWAT-like garments. And this, I think this was an ABC clip. I don't know if you ever saw this, but it got squashed pretty quick.
Well, I don't. You're breaking up a little bit on me.
Yeah,
I don't remember hearing that. But I tell you, I believe that there was very suspicious activity. Heard a lot of suspicious allegations. And when you look at the crime scene of the Las Vegas shooting, to me, that is a lot more suspicious. And there's a lot of things that don't add up with that, including what happened aftermath of that, which is the gun ban by executive order on bump stocks. Everything about that, to me, seems to be fishy. However, Steve Pachinik, the first time I had him on as an interview, I'd had him on once before, and I believe it was the day before my show began on a Monday. It was on a Sunday, and there was a hurricane that was going through Florida. And so we came in and we did a special report. And since he lived in Florida, they had him on, and I talked to him about the hurricane. And we had a good report when we talked about that. And then he came back on a few months later. So that was July or August of 2017, and then he came back about 4 or 5 days after the Vegas shooting. And he was supposed to come on for 2 segments. He missed the first segment. He came on a bit late in the second segment, and he tried to sandbag me. He just wouldn't stop talking about how it was all a setup and that nobody had died. The entire thing was a false flag. And I said, I don't believe that at all, because I talked to people earlier in the week. I didn't believe, even though I thought it was very suspicious, I had no problem. I thought there were some allegations that made a lot of sense in terms of possible federal involvement and other things in terms of the arms deals and just a lot of things about it that I thought were suspicious. But I did not believe this whole thing about nobody died. And that came up after all the Sandy Hook lawsuit. So he was trying to set me up. That was my first experience with Steve Pachinik in a real interview. And I've never interviewed him again. I told the guys never book him again. But as far as the Parkland shooting goes, I'm not familiar with the allegation that you mentioned, and I didn't follow that one as closely as I did the Vegas shooting. Yeah.
There was also a quick video snippet that they immediately squashed. I got it. I shared it on Facebook, where someone had a video camera on David Hogg, and they were discussing the fact that he wasn't actually a student, that he was actually 26 years old. That's what they said in the video. Now, again, it's a video. I don't know where it came from, but David Hogg was filmed in California a little bit before that. He was an activist down there. I think his father was an FBI agent. I don't know if you know that or not.
No, I didn't know that.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, David Hogg is, the thing about David Hogg is he's pretty much discredited himself with the comments that he's made afterwards. So
he changed the story like 2 or 3 times, too. That was another thing.
Yeah. If he's COINTEL, they didn't train him very well. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I have an interesting question. Have you ever had the FBI visit you, or like a swatting or anything like that, based on the information that you share on your video podcasts or anything?
No, not me personally. Shortly after I began working for InfoWars, we had the Secret Service show up, and then shortly after that, we had Texas Rangers show up. Both times they were there because of comments that had been left on our website, and we didn't want to get involved in that. So what Alex did was he just turned it over to Discus or one of these comment services, because they've taken the approach that you're responsible for the stuff that shows up there. And that's one of the reasons why, when everybody talks about censorship, this is not something that is the decision of these technocracies. They're doing this because of pressure from the government. They're doing it because of carrots and sticks. And, of course, the carrots are that they're going to have access to certain things. But there's also sticks attached. The censorship is coming directly from the government. never miss that.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of that, I find it harder and harder to do research online for good information. For example, Google is doing a lot to suppress information about certain elite people. I make some videos called Meet Your Central Planner, and where I try to highlight somebody and just kind of share information about them. And I find it harder and harder to get information that I know they wouldn't want out. Do you happen to use a certain kind of search engine, or do you just have a lot of library books or knowledge or personal knowledge? I mean, how do you find things that you're looking for like that?
Well, first of all, I don't use Google, because Google has become a search engine that is designed to hide things, and I'm one of the things that they like to hide. And so I know they do that with other people who are friends. They hide their enemies, and they hide people that are their friends as well. So, and certain things about people. So they hide certain people, and they hide things about their friends. So absolutely not using Google, but there are other search engines that are out there that are not to that state yet. My background is I've been involved in politics and history, things like that, for a long time. And so when I look at the reports, I'm kind of trying to second guess them. And of course, you can find articles out there with the Wayback Machine if you know what you're looking for. You can find some stuff if you're trying to do a background search on somebody. But usually the stuff that is out there is damning enough to understand what these people are trying to do. And if you understand, if you understand human nature, if you understand what these people have been saying for decades, then you know where this is going. I mean, back in the 1970s, Zbigniew Brzezinski that I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the USMCA, he was talking about between two ages, and he was talking about the technocratic tyranny that was going to come. Here we are 50 years later, and it's exactly what is happening. So these people they're like supervillains. They have a compulsion to dialogue, right?
Yeah.
And so we knew this about them even before they said in 2015, put out a video saying you'll own nothing and you'll be happier and that type of thing. They openly came out. They gave us their time frame. They told us exactly how they wanted to take everything from us. So it's there. And typically what you'll find, in terms of talking about this, I keep thinking back to when Michael Bloomberg was running for president. And you remember when he trash-talked farmers?
Yes.
Well, that's what everybody picked up on. And even the outlets like Breitbart, for example, they had the entire quote that he had to say. And they missed the context of what he was saying. And they missed the final thing that he said. Even though they printed it there, they didn't comment on it. So it was laying right there for you to see. But he trashed the farmers because he was talking about the agricultural revolution, the revolution from the agrarian society to the industrial revolution. And then he said we had people working in the factories and we replaced them as well. But he goes, now we've got another revolution that is coming. And he said, the smart ones of us are working to take everybody's jobs, and we just have to figure out how we're going to keep them happy so they don't come after us with guillotines. What he was talking about before the Great Reset became popularized, he was talking about this fourth industrial revolution that Klaus Schwab is talking about. He was talking about universal basic income. He was talking about how they were going to take our jobs away from us. We knew that this was the plan. We knew that they wanted to have a society in 2030 where everybody just sat at home, isolated in a little cubicle, not going to work. And the question was, how are they going to pull this off? Well, now we know. The pandemic.
Yeah. Do we have time for
Sure.
one or two more questions? Okay, just want to make sure.
Oh, yeah.
I've got three. Do you think you have enough time for three?
Yeah, I'll try to make answers concise.
And these are big questions. I'll try not to bore you too much. Okay. Do you believe that the elite governments of the world? Do you believe the governments of the world are hiding things in Antarctica? And if so, what do you think they're hiding there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they could be hiding anything. I believe they hide things everywhere. They hide them in plain sight. I wouldn't be surprised if they have them in Antarctica, but I don't have any specific information about that.
Because I know, I think Hitler had, I guess they were saying that he was doing bases in Antarctica. I don't know. I I haven't confirmed anything yet. I know that John Kerry and Obama, I think, did visits down there too. So I always wonder what they're doing down there. So didn't know if you knew anything about it.
No, I don't. I saw a strange article where they were saying that at one of these Antarctic communities, you have to have your appendix removed before you go, even if you're a child, because they don't want you to have an emergency on that. This is crazy.
Wow.
You talk about preventive medicine. That's a bit over the top.
Yeah. Well, Antarctica is very.
Those guys are crazy down there. Yeah.
Well, Antarctica is very unusual because you pretty much can't visit anywhere of Antarctica except for the just a small peninsula area where they do a lot of their research and stuff. They've got the Antarctic Treaty, which basically bans exploration of Antarctica for most people. So there's so many questions about that area for me. But anyway, do you? Here's a big question. I think you said yes to this, but I just wanted to hear your answer. But do you believe that aliens are real? And do you believe that the governments of the world may be setting up a fake space war with them? Carol Rosen, who knew Werner von Braun, mentioned that they were wanting to do space weapons and that eventually they would try to do like a fake alien attack. Now, when Trump came out with Space Force, this immediately got my attention. So, I don't know. I just wanted to see what you thought about that.
Well, in terms of whether the aliens are real, look, if you are a Christian, you understand that there's a lot of extraterrestrial life, right? There's an amazing number and variety of extraterrestrial life created. We don't fight against flesh and blood. They are actually the ones who are orchestrating everything that we see being done by these politicians or even these big banking families that go for multiple generations. And so there is a spiritual war that is happening. It is supernatural. It's extraterrestrial. And in terms of a deception, that could be done through their agents in government. I believe that there are connections there. I believe these people are Satan worshipers. I don't have any specifics about that. I'm just looking at their behavior. That's just my gut instinct about that. But from the Bible, I know that there's a lot of different supernatural powers. I know that there will be deceptions. I can't imagine, unless it was some kind of an alien invasion, that the people of Earth would ally themselves to fight God, to think that they could defeat God. I would imagine that there would be some kind of a reveal, and I'm just speculating, what could happen. I look at Revelation and I say, well, as time goes by, there's a lot of different interpretations of eschatology, and I've got, teachers that I like about the Bible that will come to completely different conclusions about it. So I'm not dogmatic about eschatology. However, as time goes by, it seems to look more and more literal. And of course, in the Bible, you see things that are figurative as well as literal all the time. What happened to Moses and the Exodus and children of Israel, all of that, I believe, literally happened in history, but I think it was also had many pictures that were symbolic. So I think both of those things can happen at the same time. It's a big part of prophecy in the Old Testament that literal things that happened to people would be a prefiguring of something that would eventually happen with Christ. So when we look at what is happening and what may happen with Revelation, if we look at this as a literal war, as a literal invasion or something like that, I can imagine that supernatural beings, demonic beings, would present themselves as exactly what they've been training us through media and through entertainment for generations to expect. And that is that they're going to come. I think one of the science fiction novels that comes closest to the way that I would imagine this rolling out would be Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. And in that, he has this group of space aliens come to Earth, and when they walk out, they look like the old medieval depictions of Lucifer, with Baphomet, with the big horns and all in red, with a cloven foot and cloven feet, and wings and stuff like that, and they come from a planet that looks like it's on fire, all of this type of thing. And they present themselves as saviors of mankind. They create world peace, they share technology, and all these different things to try to gain man's trust before the ultimate betrayal as part of the movie and the book, because it was later done as a movie not too long ago. But that's what I think is happening with it. Now, the government may very well have a part to play in it. The world governments may have a part to play in all that deception, but it's ultimately coming from the supernatural powers that we're at war with, and they're at war with Christ.
Yeah, well, great. That's a. And my last question is, I've heard you mention that you adopted a girl from China. I just wondered what the significance of that. Why did you guys choose to adopt from China?
Well, we had adopted my son Travis, who is my engineer and co-producer on this with my wife. They book the interviews and that type of thing. But he's the engineer for all this. We had adopted Travis, and we had been married for 13 years and had been unable to have kids, and we had been unable to adopt. And then we had a relative in Virginia Beach, and he was aware that we had been trying to adopt, and we went up to his son's birthday talking about that, and he knew a lawyer who did adoption. You see, and after we had tried for
the video is breaking up quite a bit.
His home, there are agencies there in Carolina trying to adopt. And are you having problems with you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you just repeat that part?
A week on. Hear me now?
Yeah, you're good. It's good now.
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't know how much I missed. Do you want me to back up?
Yeah, just back up to the point where you're talking about Travis and adopting him, because I was missing a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, when we adopted Travis, was an open adoption. We found out through a friend of my brother-in-law's who was a lawyer about that, and it happened very quickly. We had already tried to adopt several times, so our paperwork was all current, and so we found out that it was an open adoption, and he was going to be born in about 2 weeks, and the people who had planned to adopt him had changed their mind. Just as he contacted the lawyer, so we saw that as a special thing. It was a real blessing from God, and so we adopted him about 2 weeks later because we had the paperwork all done, and it was a good experience. Except that we went to North Carolina, we had and the parental rights were terminated in Virginia, but everything was going well in North Carolina. But we moved to a different county, and that clerk of the court decided that they needed to have some paperwork from the father, who would never acknowledge that there was any that he had paternity, and so it became a big paperwork hassle as that part of it. We subsequently had we had been trying in terms of it, and Karen got pregnant at that point in time as well. So we got two sons who were just 8 months apart. But we went for a number of years. So two sons, and we were a bit older because we'd been married for 13 years. And so we were 50 years old, and we had friends who had adopted from China, and they were telling us about the process, and they said it's very organized, and it's not a problem, and you're not going to have any hassles with it. And so we decided we'd give it a try, and God provided a way for that to happen. And the good about it at that time was that there was, once you adopted the child in China, and it was a very set process. They had a lot of agencies that were, adopting girls because they were being abandoned with a one-child policy. So orphan girls, most of them were adopted as infants. Older, the only way that we would qualify was with an older child, actually. And we found a daughter who had some special needs concerns, but it turned out to not be an issue, but that's why they had not adopted her. So we adopted her at the age of 5, and we didn't have any problems with any legal stuff. As a matter of fact, it worked out easier than it did with a domestic adoption. We had known some other people who had had domestic adoptions, and because of the court system here, you can have some problems with it that are just horrific after you've had a child for a couple of years and you've become family, then to have the judge come in and take the child away, and because the mom is at a halfway house out of prison with drug addiction, and I've seen children taken away from a Christian home that they were very happy in, a home that was the only home that they ever knew. And so there's crazy things that happen in the court system that don't really look at the best interest of the child. So that's why we adopted in China.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think that's all I have for you today. Can you share briefly with our audience how they can connect with your content?
Sure. Right now we've got our website is really just kind of a splash page, thedavidknightshow.com. thedavidknightshow.com, and there you will see all the different places where you can watch the program either live or we put up the full show every day, Monday through Friday. We have a 3-hour show. So you can get links to that on BitChute, on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble. The links are there. We also have links to the show put up as a podcast on a daily basis. And then there's also links as to how you can support us because we're run by donations. We have started having ads inserted for the podcast, but there's not that many of them, and that really doesn't pay the bills. We only started that about a month or so ago. I was concerned about what's going to happen this next year as a lot of people who listen are maybe going to lose jobs because of the vaccine mandates. And so we looked at it and we need to do something. They're not sponsors in the sense that we don't endorse them. As a matter of fact, they just buy blocks of advertising and then it gets inserted by Spreaker when the podcast goes out. And we've actually, for a while there, we were sponsored by Pfizer. It's kind of really hilarious because I would do a long segment of 20 minutes or so hammering Pfizer and how bad they were and their products, and then they would come on with a little 30-second ad. So it's like, okay, well, no. Alex and I had our differences on a lot of different issues as well, and he paid me until he found out about it. And I guess the same thing with Pfizer. Pfizer's not a sponsor of the podcast anymore, I don't think. I don't really know. Sponsors are, so I don't necessarily endorse them. They're just putting the ad there just like you would see it with Pandora. But you can find all the places that we are and how you can support us. Audio, video, and live audio and video. You can find all those links at thedavidknightshow.com.